Hello, Fearless Gamers! Matt here for Fearless Games, and today we're going to be doing a Eldar Primer in celebration of the Eldar's release in 6th edition. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the codexes, a little bit of the history of the Eldar, their society, their culture, and all that good stuff. And so we're going to jump right in without delay. And first and foremost, I'm going to say for the history of the codex part, probably going to need some citation. I'm going off of the copyrights in the covers of the books, so I may be inaccurate as to the release date of the codexes themselves. So if I'm wrong on that front, I do apologize. And so let us jump right in. So now, as far as I'm aware, the Eldar first appeared in 2nd edition of Warhammer 40,000. That's another thing to citate. I may be off on that one as well. And they first got their first codex in the 2nd edition of Warhammer 40,000, which was in 1994 with Codex Eldar, written by Rick Priestley. And this actually brings back a lot of memories. This actually was one book I never used, because I jumped in at 3rd edition, but the codexes still were the same price back then. This was $20 back in the day. Remember that, when codexes were $20? I do. Those were good times. And this was our, this was our first look at the Eldar. It gave us the history of the Eldar, what they were all about, and some of their crazy, crazy rules first started us with this book. This had a fairly large variety of Eldar stuff in it. This had the Eldar, the Corsairs, or the Pirates as they were known back then, and the Exodites, and the mysterious Harlequins. We had a lot of crazy rules that went through this book. We had stuff where, like, the Avatar was immune to flamers, meltas, and plasmas, and a bunch of grenades. Dark Reapers could destroy terrain. There was the thing called the Solitaire, which was a really broken dude in close combat. There was the fact Warp Spiders had template weapons, and a lot of crazy, crazy stuff. And actually, in this variant, the Wraith Lord was actually called just an Eldar Dreadnought. And it had a large variety of pictures showing off the different units, beautiful artwork, and also gave us a beautiful inside look into the Eldar themselves. And in the back, you can actually still reference how old some of the GW's models are, since the Phoenix Lords haven't changed at all. And the Warp Spiders also have not changed at all since this edition, which is pretty interesting to see what models have stood the test of time. Even the Avatar hasn't changed since this edition, which is pretty interesting. And so this codex would last the Eldar until we got into 3rd edition, and we would get a 3rd edition codex in 1999, which was the Codex Eldar, written by Gav Thrope. Now, very similar to a lot of the codexes of the time and currently, this codex gave us less information than the original 2nd edition codex did. Essentially, they assumed you had all the knowledge from the 2nd edition codex. And if you didn't, you'd get it through, stories and vets of the 2nd edition game telling you all about it. This one, the Eldar did lose a couple of their abilities. We lost the Harlequins, we lost the Exodites, we lost the Corsairs, and a lot of the weapons and rules changed to fit with the changing ways of 3rd edition. But they were probably what was considered the poster child of Warhammer 40,000, primarily because they got all the cool stuff, and they were by far one of the most powerful armies in the game. In fact, in 3rd edition, if you played Eldar, you were guaranteed to get a game in anytime you went to the hobby shop, because everyone hated the Eldar. Because they ignored Plasma Gets Hot, they ignored jamming, their ships had saves against armor penetrations, their ships could strike back if they were attacked, Far Spheres could cast 2 powers in a single turn, Far Spheres had up to 4 hours and stuff, their Warlocks didn't need to roll for their psychic powers. They were just full of breaking rules cheese that everybody could not stand. And this would be pretty much what this would be. Essentially, this kept with the 2nd edition's overpowered Eldar, which just showed you, even though they were really frail and fragile, that they could pack a major punch when it time to get into games. And in 3rd edition, near the tail end of 3rd edition, we would get a supplement book in 2000 called Craftworld Eldar by Gav Thrope, Jarvis Johnson, and Andy Chambers. Now, this one wasn't really a new codex in terms of we didn't get like a lot of new stuff. This was more of a way to help make those Craftworld specific Eldar. This gave us special rules for Uthway, Samehan, Alitok, Iaden, and Bieltan. Then there were 1 or 2 extra units, but nothing to the point where you need new models and such. This book would actually be the introduction to a lot of new Aspect Warriors in it. This was the first time we got our new Dark Reapers, which I kind of like the helmets of a little bit better. We got new Howling Banshees and new Striking Scorpions. And the Dire Avengers we did get new Dire Avengers, which though I think these guys, I'm not sure because I never played with Dire Avengers actually no, they changed the Dire Avengers in this one. It was the Warp Spiders, and I believe the Fire Dragons also got a thing, but the Warp Spiders and the Shining Spears were the ones that basically stayed the same. It was also in 3rd edition that the Wraith Lord became the Wraith Lord. And so there wasn't much that was changed here. Again, it was just extra special rules. Oh, you got this. So it was very easy to accommodate your existing army with this codex. And this bad boy was actually only $10. I mean, now that's something. I mean, back in the day, a book by GW for $10, who would have think it now? A lot of you guys who probably just started out are going, I don't know about your information there, vet. But so then we jump into 5th edition. 4th edition. They were in the tail end of 4th edition going into 5th edition. In 2006, we got the current Eldar Codex by Phil Kelly. This book, I have to admit, is not my favorite. And a lot of people are not fans of this book. And even the writer Phil Kelly says that he was not a fan of this book. And he claims that a lot of this was caused by editorial mandate, and which is why he's worked very hard to try and get them to do the 6th edition codex for the Eldar, to essentially make the Eldar he always wanted to. This book, the Eldar would get a power down in terms of their weaponry and their forces, and again, we would be introduced to a new model called the Artok, which wasn't that great, because primarily a lot of the stuff that you gave him, if you didn't equip him right, because he would lose a lot of the usefulness depending on which group of Aspect Warriors and such you partnered him with. So he wasn't that great. The Psychers were still probably the best thing that we had, because we had a lot of psychic control on the board. We also did see a little bit of a price decrease in vehicles, so we could throw more skimmers on the field. But all in all, it was a very lackluster codex, primarily because there was only really one way to play. It actually got to the point where I don't play Warp Spiders, and they were like one of the best units in the book, and so every time I went to a game, everyone's like, why aren't there any Warp Spiders in your army? Type of thing. It got to the point where the only really real way to play this game was to play one of 2 books, and in fact, to keep up with the Eldar overpowerness, everyone basically run Eldrad and Urolf to make the best HQ combination that you could get at the time. And this is our codex that it is today, but there technically is another codex. And actually, before I go on to that, one thing that was added, I forgot to mention this before, in 3rd edition we lost, like I said, we lost the Harlequins, the Pirates, and all that. We got the Harlequins back in this book, but unfortunately we did not get the Solitaire. And that I'm not too horribly upset about. The Solitaire was cool and all, but I don't really think we need him, especially in the fluff. Especially in the fluff they gave us, they said they kind of try to avoid battles. They only fought if there was like no other choice and they had to. And that was all we really got out of this book as well, on top of the Artok. Then we moved on into the late 5th edition stuff in 2011, 2012-ish, that time period, Forge World would make the Imperial Armor Volume 11, Doom of Mymeria. This was a book that introduced Mymeria, the Forge World specific craft world, and gave us a neat little rule set for playing Eldar Corsairs, something we've been missing since 2nd edition. And so it gave you rules on how to do Corsairs and gave them proper rules, different units and the such. They got a special character for the craft world Mymeria. They introduced us to a new aspect warrior, the Shadow Spectres, with a Phoenix Lord, a Relief, the Shard of Twilight, or the Light of Twilight, or something like that. I forget. Or I forget his title right now. And we also got some new units. We got the Warp Hunter, we got the Wraith Seer, we got some new War Walkers, and some cool little Skimmer Viper hybrid things. A lot of cool stuff came out of this. But again, this is mainly Forge World stuff, so a lot of people don't really count this as a book since it's not quote-unquote officially GW. And then that brings us up to date where 6th edition is now here, and we've got a new codex coming out. What's going to happen? What are we going to see? What do I hope is going to be in it? We'll leave that for another video, when I'm back in my regular studio area. So, now let's talk about a little bit of the Eldar history. The Eldar are the oldest race in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, with the exception of the Necrons, since they are actually rivals to the Eldar. And at a time, the Eldar did rule the universe. They controlled everything, and it was said that the stars began and ended at the Eldar's command. And they reached a technological zenith where they basically could do whatever they wanted because everything was done and taken care of for them. So they can go into new experiences, try new things, experiment, and do all this other different stuff. And it started leading them down a path of really dark and nasty things. And what was really bad about this is the fact that Eldar are more psychically tuned than humans. In fact, it could be argued that the regular average Imperial citizen, the average Eldar civilian, is more psychically tuned than the Psychers of the Imperial Guard. And the thing is because of this, they have such stronger presence in the warp, and their mind and emotions flow and generate more influence in the warp itself. So when they started going into these darker desires and getting more decadent and more risque and more vulgar, these dark emotions started to collect together and started to form a consciousness, which eventually would turn into the Chaos God, Slaanesh. And with Slaanesh's creation, the Eye of Terror was created and the Eldar Empire was destroyed. A huge chunk of the Eldar population was destroyed, and the rest, who managed to survive, escaped on their flying ships known as the Craft Worlds. And this is when the Eldar broke into 3 different groups. There's the Eldar of the Craft World, the Dark Eldar, the Exodites, and the Corsairs. Technically, 4, sorry. We do math, yay. The Dark Eldar are, as we know, the evil Eldar, as they're per se. They believe in, Slaanesh is out there. What's the best way to avoid Slaanesh? We can still dive into these darker pleasures and such, as long as we torture someone else so Slaanesh is more interested in them than what we're doing. Then there's the Exodites. The Exodites are basically, in a sense, for lack of a better word, they're Amish Eldar. They don't deal with technology. They deal with living off the land and using the environment and the natural resources of planets because they live on planets. Mainly planets known as Maiden Worlds or just original Eldar home worlds. And they're essentially, like I said, they're Amish Eldar. Then there's the Corsairs, or the Pirates. They're basically Craft World Eldar who don't want to live on Craft Worlds. They want to have the freedom to go out in space and go wherever they please. And then there's the Craft World Eldar, which are the Eldar of the Craft World, of the Codex Eldar. And These guys now live in floating ships known as craft worlds. They're giant vessels able to hold a planet's population without any trouble inside of it. And what's neat about it is it basically provides all the basic necessities. It provides food, water, atmosphere. Everything is monitored on the craft world. So there's no need for, farmers, for technicians and such like that. It all runs on its own, in a way. And because of this, the Eldar have a very interesting society. It's very Star Trekian in a way. There's no currency. If you take, if you are a merchant, then your reward for your hard work is the fact that people admire your craft to use it, and the fact that you're keeping yourself disciplined and focused and keeping your mind free from moving astray into darker thoughts. Because the Eldar feel that they have to keep their minds disciplined and trained, so they're like ultimate hobbyists in a sense. Now, what they do is, like, say they have these paths. These different paths hold different, and essentially they're different jobs. There's the path of the server, who, is like a waiter in a sense. There's a path of the artist, which can break into the path of the sculptor, the path of the painter. There's the path of the dreamer, which, dreams and takes interpretations of their dreams to what it can mean in real life. There's the path of the singer, path of the musician, path of the poet. All different states. There's path of the healer, and it's crazy. You can go on. Basically, any type of job or hobby or art form or any form of physical activity that one would consider a job or way of life is a path in the Eldar world. And that also includes the warrior paths, which are the aspect warriors. Eventually, every Eldar goes down the aspect warrior path, because eventually their hate gets the better of them, and they need to focus their minds in order to keep themselves from falling into those dark thoughts. And these are broken down into different shrines. There's the Dire Avengers, the Fire Dragons, the Howling Banshees, the Striking Scorpions, the Swooping Ox, the Shining Spears, the Warp Spiders, and then there's also the new one, the Crimson Hunters. And these are all different aspects of war via through Cain. Oh, and also if you count Forge World, there's the Shadow Specters. They all form different ideas of Cain, and different forms of war and the like. And so each of them have their own different path, and what this does is this allows them to do what they call put on their war mask. Able to put on those dark, deep fears and bring them out in a way where they can, after battle is done, remove their war mask and go back to normal living. But this isn't entirely true for all Eldar. For some, the path of the warrior is a very, shall we say, enticing role, and some get so obsessed into perfecting the art of war that they get lost down the path and become an Exarch. An Exarch is a Eldar aspect warrior that is basically become consumed by the path, to the point where there's no turning back and they can never return to a normal life. And these Exarches, what's different about them is they have the shared knowledge of all the other Exarches that came before them within their shrine, because every aspect warrior has their own shrine. Think of them like schools, and there's multiple ones across different ones. So every squad of Striking Scorpions may not be all from the same shrine. They may, if you have two squads of Striking Scorpions, they're most likely from two different shrines. Each of them having only one Exarch, because Exarches only allow one in their shrines at a time. And they have this special, unique, ornate armor, which is usually the first armor, the first founder of that particular shrine. And on that armor is soul stones with the souls of every single Eldar that possess that armor. And once the new Exarch dons the armor, they cease to be themselves, and they proceed to be the original Exarch, because his spirit and personality is the most dominant. Now the thing, though, is they are aware that they are somebody else. So let's just say, for example, it's me, Matt here, and I go into John's shrine, and I take John's armor on. Well, now I'm John. I'm still aware that I was Matt, my name was Matt, and Matt is the physical form that I am right now, but I only answer to the name John, and people would address me as if I was John, but are fully aware that I'm Matt. A good example is in one story, an Exarch goes to an Artarch and is like, oh, you know, don't forget you owe me one, and I'm calling in that deal, and he says, I made that deal with so-and-so. That's not you anymore. You're now so-and-so. You just happen to be in his armor type of thing. So it's one of these things where they kind of accept, you know, yes, he's going to call himself John, but he was Matt. And Matt, if he takes off his helmet, it's Matt underneath the armor. Now, the Aspect Warriors do have these things called Phoenix Lords, which are basically super Exarches. The difference is they founded the Aspect Warrior class. So, every Shrine of Striking Scorpions brings them all back to the original Striking Scorpion. All the Warp Spiders can be brought back to the Warp Spider Phoenix Lord if he actually exists. They never confirm or deny that. And so on and so forth. And the difference between these Phoenix Lords over regular Exarches is one, once someone dons their armor, their personality takes on full and foremost. They are forever no longer that character. So, for example, again, let's just use Azurman. I go and I put on Azurman's armor. I'm Azurman. I was never Matt. Matt's body, Matt doesn't exist at all. Matt gave his spirit to give me life again. So they completely, 100%, even other Eldar would go, that's Azurman. Matt gave his life for Azurman to reawaken. Yes, Matt put on the armor, but once he put on the armor, he stopped being Matt completely. That's not Matt. That body is Azurman's. That's how it works with that. And even still, like with the Phoenix Lords, when someone puts on their armor, it's like they never stopped being themselves. So if they died 200 years ago, someone puts on the armor, it's as if they woke up. That's how it's perceives to them. They just like, huh? Oh, that was a nice 200-year nap. Time to go off and be Phoenix Lords again. So in a sense, they've achieved, in a way, kind of perfect immortality. The only way they can totally die is if all the Eldar die, because then no one can actually don the armor to make them come back to life. Now, with that, there's also another warrior. Before I go on to that, there's the thing that I mentioned that was introduced in 4th edition called the Artarch. The Artarch is a Aspect Warrior commander who's gone down multiple paths. So he could have been a Dire Avenger, then a Howling Banshee, then a Swooping Hawk, then a Warp Spider, then a Striking Scorpion. He could be all of them at one point. And it's one where he's not satisfied with learning only one aspect of battle, but wants to learn them all. And they become master strategists, and they're pretty much the generals of the craft world. They, with the Farseers, make the final decisions on what the craft world's actions are going to be and what they're going to do. And with that, there is another warrior-ish aspect path called the Path of the Seer. The Path of the Seer is one that dives into the psychic capabilities of the Eldar. It's one of the more dangerous ones because they're allowing themselves into the warp more and makes them more exposed to the dangers of the warp itself. But it gives them the ability to see into the past, the present, and the future and help craft the fate of their craft world so they can avoid certain doom for as long as possible and hope and try to find a way to keep their race to survive. But those that go down the Path of the Seer and continue down it will upgrade from a Warlock to a Farseer. And once you're a Farseer, it's essentially like the Exarch status, except they're always themselves. It's not like one of these, they take on armor. No. If I start as a Warlock and I become a Farseer, I'm still Farseer Matt. I'm not Farseer Tim, the first Farseer, or anything like that. And what happens to a Farseer that's going down this path, eventually their body will crystallize, and as they gain more power and dive more into the warp, and eventually they will, like I said, they'll become crystallized until they become a pure crystalline statue in the heart of the craft world, which is known as the Dome of the Crystal Seers. And inside the very heart of the craft world is the Chamber of the Avatar. Now, the Avatar is a fragment of the Eldar god of Kala Mensha Cain, Bloody-Handed Cain, who is now the thing with the Eldar gods is they feel like their gods are dead. They have their own mythology of how mortals and gods became separated and what happened to them, and it is their belief that Slaanesh killed all of the Eldar gods, but instead of killing Cain, Cain was ripped and torn to sunder, and shards of his body flew up to all the craft worlds and landed in the core of the ships, and from that a avatar of him grew. And there's actually one Eldar god that they feel is alive, and that's the Great Harlequin, the Laughing God, who hid behind Cain and fled to the Webway, where he now lives today. And they actually also has been implied that their god, Isha, the one that created the Eldar, is alive and in the capture of Nurgle. Whether or not that's true, I haven't read the latest Demon Codex, so I don't know if they've kept that fluff or not. And let's see, the Eldar have the most seem to be the most technologically advanced of all the races, combining psychic energy and psychic powers with technology. They use this stuff called Wraithbone, which is this material that's stronger than steel and it's very versatile, and with psychic tuning it can be crafted into different elements and different forms. This is how they make their guns, their armor, and their such. They can control what color it is, so they technically have no metal in their materials, but they can make it look metal if they want it to, and it's essentially a versatile material because it can be whatever they want it to be. They just need to use what's called a Bone Singer. It's a special aspect path that can psychically craft the Wraithbone into what they need it to be. Excuse me. And let's see, what else is there about the Eldar? One thing is they're very big into trickery, and they seem to do a lot of random attacks, according to the Imperium. This is primarily because they do things knowing they will have an effect in the future. It may be tomorrow, it may be the day after, it may be 300 years from now. But if they feel it will save the lives of Eldar, they will do it. So, for example, if I end up becoming a great Imperial commander, that's going to be the bane of the Eldar in 100 years from now, where they're going to find where I make some great siege that will put their craft world in danger. They'll do a raid on a military base that I'm at while I'm still a private, so they can kill me to ensure that never happens. And it will seem like a totally random attack. No one will know why they did it, but the Eldar know why they did it, because in 100 years from now, it's gonna make their lives better, because I'm no longer there to turn the tide. Like I mentioned, there are these things, the Harlequins. The Harlequins are basically, they're like these killer clowns, everyone likes to call them. They are servants of the Laughing God, and they are masters of the Webway. They perform a lot of Eldar rituals in terms of performances of telling different stories, like the fall of the Eldar, the war in heaven, and each Harlequin plays a different role in that. They're also keepers of what's known as the Black Library. The Black Library is what is the storage of all Eldar knowledge. They've got knowledge beyond human imagination. It is even rumored that they have a copy, the only existing copy of the Book of Magnus, the demon prince of the Thousand Sons. And only very few are allowed in there that are non-Eldar, and even Eldar, it's tough to get in there, and they don't even know where it is. Only the Harlequins know where the Black Library is. And they don't give that information out to just anyone. And mentioning the Webway, the Eldar have basically perfected teleport travel far beyond humans. They have what's called the Webway, basically a series of interconnecting tunnels inside the warp that makes them able to travel from place to place extremely fast. Some of these are connected straight to planets, some of them are big enough for ships to go through, some of them are small enough where only people can walk through. The thing with them is only the Eldar can use them. In a sense, they're the only ones that really use these tunnels because they're the only ones who know how to navigate through them. And it allows them to appear pretty much anywhere across the universe that they need to be where they want to. They can even use these webways to connect themselves to other craft worlds. And the craft worlds themselves, as I mentioned, are these giant ships, and they have in themselves their own societal differences of their own sort of personalities. In a way. Let me just get my list so I can remember, because I know I'm going to forget. There's Uthway, who's very big in the Psychers. They're known as the seers of the Eldar. They seem to be very big at looking into the future of the Eldar and working the hardest to try and prevent their doom from happening. They're also the closest to the Eye of Terror, so they're the ones that are exposed primarily to the enemies of the warp in real space and the warp itself. There's Samhan, which is basically the most tribal of the craft worlds. They have a very ritualistic native tribal system going for them, and their big thing is jet bikes and vipers and skimmers and such. They're a big, fast vehicle army. Then there is Alaitok. Alaitok has the largest collection of rangers out of all of them. Primarily, like I said, with rangers are basically their outcasts. They're the ones that want to be free. They don't want to deal with the rigorous disciplined life of a craft world. They want to move through the Sea of Stars as they see fit. And Alaitok has the largest group of population that can't stand living on the craft world, and very often go off to be a ranger or an outcast, which pretty much are the same thing. And then there is Aedan. Aedan has one of the more tragic stories of all of them. Thanks to the Hive Fleet Kraken, they lost a lot of their population, and so now they primarily rely on Wraith Lords and Wraith Guards, and possibly when they come out, the Wraith Knights and the Wraith Blades and the Wraith Flyer thing that they have, Wraith Jet Fighter or something like that, to do all their fighting for them. Essentially, they use their dead to protect them because they have no other choice. These are basically their constructs that are made out of Wraith Bone, that when a Spirit Stone, it's this gem that the Eldar put on their bodies, it's to protect them for when they die. Because when they die, their physical warp energy and their psychic connection to the warp is so intense and strong, it kind of resembles that of a soul or spirit. This essence is very much a desired, delicate treat for Slaanesh. So, to protect themselves from the evil jaws of She Who Thirsts, they put these Spirit Stones on. So when they die, the Spirit Stone traps their essence inside of it, and they live free inside the Spirit Stone. Normally, the Spirit Stone is put into the Wraithbone core of the craft world, where it becomes part of the Infinity Circuit, basically the brain of the craft world. It allows the Eldar to communicate with the craft world itself to get what they want. Like if they want to go to observation deck number 3, they can sit down in a little craft thing and say observation deck number 3, and the craft world will send them there. They can go to a circuitry panel and go, "Where's John?" and the Infinity Circuit will tell them where John is. But these things can also be the spirits can be summoned into these Spirit Stones and put into these Wraith constructions and basically become ghost warriors, where they can walk the land. It's very much like Dreadnoughts. The only difference is they're already like dead, whereas Dreadnoughts tend to be, they're half-living bodies inside these sarcophagi. These things are dead, so so there's really no body, no flesh for them to destroy. As long as the Spirit Stone is safe, they can always get a new body. And that is the primary force of the Aedan. So if you're ever going up against an Aedan army, expect a lot of Wraith constructions. And then there's Bieltan. Bieltan is probably it is the most militaristic of all the craft worlds. It has the largest number of aspect warriors, shrines, out of all the craft worlds out there. So when you go to Bealtan, you're going to see a ton of Dire Avengers, Striking Scorpions, Fire Dragons, the whole slew. You're going to get the most aspect warriors that you can get with the Bealtan system. And one army they hate the most is orcs, because they don't like how easily they can take over a planet if left unchecked. And that is basically all I can think of to talk about the Eldar. I hope this was informative. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And for now, that's going to be it. And we're going to conclude this whole little thing with me doing an open box set again on Saturday when the Eldar come out. That'll probably be up at around 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, June 1st. So keep a lookout for that, because I've got a lot of stuff that I'm going to be doing open boxing of. So it's going to be interesting. Again, thank you all for watching. Subscribe so that way you can be the first to see the video when we do the unboxing. Like us. Comment what do you like. What's your favorite thing about the Eldar? What's your least favorite thing about the Eldar? Greatest moments you have with the Eldar. And if there's any new model that you're definitely going to buy, what are you going to get? And also like us on Facebook, that way you can keep up to date with what's going on with the Fearless and know what's happening before it happens. So again, thank you all for watching, and until next time, Fearless Gamers, take care.